On February 22, 2026, Mexican Special Forces ended the life of Nemesio Rubén Oseguera Cervantes, the man known as El Mencho. The 59-year-old leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG, was wounded during a raid in the mountain town of Tapalpa, Jalisco. He was airlifted toward Mexico City, but died from multiple gunshot wounds during the flight. United States intelligence provided real-time support that pinned his exact location. The decisive lead came from surveillance on one of his romantic partners, Guadalupe Moreno Carrillo. On February 20, a trusted associate drove her to a remote property in Tapalpa for a meeting with El Mencho. Military teams watched the site for 2 days. At dawn on the 22nd, special forces moved in. Cartel gunmen opened fire immediately. El Mencho and 2 bodyguards fled into a wooded cabin complex. Soldiers overran the position. 6 of his men died in the initial clashes. 3 Mexican troops were injured. His body arrived in Mexico City under heavy guard that same afternoon. Within hours of his death, CJNG unleashed coordinated retaliation across multiple states. Roadblocks sprang up on highways in Jalisco, Guanajuato, Nayarit, Michoacán, Colima, and beyond. More than 85 vehicles were torched. Businesses and gas stations burned. At least 25 National Guard troops.
Because El Mencho's story isn't just about drugs and violence.
Over 30 suspected cartel members were killed in the chaos. 1 civilian lost his life. Airlines canceled flights into Puerto Vallarta as smoke filled the skies. Schools shut down. Tourists locked themselves indoors. The cartel broadcast bounties of 20,000 pesos for every soldier killed. Senior Lieutenant Hugo Sar Macas Urea, known as El Tuli, directed much of the violence from El Grullo before troops located and killed him later that day. This wave of destruction marked the immediate aftermath of the fall of the last major kingpin, a former police officer who transformed a splinter group into the most violent and powerful criminal organization operating on the North American continent. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was born on July 17, 1966, in the rural community of Naranjo de Chila, inside Aguililla, Michoacán. His family scraped by on an avocado farm. He dropped out of school after 5th grade and worked the fields. By age 14, he was already guarding marijuana plantations for local growers. In the early 1980s, he crossed illegally into California using multiple aliases. There he produced methamphetamine alongside relatives and associates. He was arrested several times for drug offenses, including a 1994 conviction in the Northern District of California for conspiracy to distribute heroin. He served nearly 3 years in federal prison and was deported back to Mexico in the early 1990s. Once home, he briefly worked as a municipal police officer in Cabo Corrientes and Tomatlán, Jalisco, before quitting to commit fully to organized crime. In 1996, he married Rosalinda González Valencia, sister of key figures in the Mencho Cartel. The marriage gave him direct access to established trafficking networks. He started as an enforcer and assassin, protecting higher bosses. After the 2010 death of Ignacio Coronel Villarreal and a series of major arrests, the Mencho Cartel fractured. Oseguera took command of a faction that called itself Los Mata-Zetas. They waged a savage war against remnants of the old group and against Los Zetas cartel. Their signature was extreme, public violence designed to terrorize anyone who stood in their way. By 2011, they had rebranded as the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Propaganda videos flooded the internet, showing CJNG gunmen executing rivals while shouting allegiance to El Mencho. The cartel seized control of methamphetamine and fentanyl production labs, cocaine pipelines from South America, and extortion rackets that squeezed businesses, avocado farmers, and entire municipalities across Jalisco, Colima, Guanajuato, Veracruz, Michoacán, and into the United States. The brutality under El Mencho was systematic and unrelenting. In September 2011, CJNG dumped 35 tortured bodies along a major Veracruz highway during morning rush hour. Many victims had messages carved into their skin warning rivals and authorities. In 2012, when federal forces nearly captured him in Guadalajara, his men responded by burning 37 vehicles and blocking every major highway out of the city to let him escape. On April 6, 2015, Jung killed 15 Jalisco State police officers in an ambush in San Sebastián del Oeste. Days later, they slaughtered 11 federal police in Ocotlán. The escalation peaked on May 1, 2015, in Villa Purificación. Cartel gunmen fired a rocket-propelled grenade at a Mexican Army helicopter, shooting it down and killing 9 soldiers on board. That same day, they erected 39 burning bus barricades, torched 11 banks, and attacked 16 gas stations across more than 20 towns. Bodies of captured rivals hung from overpasses, with signs reading, "This is what happens to those who betray El Mencho." Cheng enforcers specialized in methods meant to break the human body and spirit before death. They used industrial flamethrowers to roast victims alive. They practiced el guiso, lowering bound men into barrels of diesel fuel or acid and boiling them until nothing recognizable remained. In a 2020 video that circulated widely, Jing hitmen tortured a half-naked captive. They forced him to the ground, stood on his head to hold him still, sliced open his chest with a hunting knife, reached in and pulled out his heart and other organs while he was still alive, then ate pieces of the flesh on camera while laughing and shouting cartel slogans. Mass graves containing hundreds of victims appeared regularly in CJN-controlled territory. They weaponized drones to drop explosives on enemy positions and planted landmines on rural roads. In 2020, they launched a direct assassination attempt on Mexico City's police chief inside the capital, using grenades and high-caliber rifles in broad daylight. Leaked audio recordings captured El Mencho personally on the phone with corrupt police commanders, ordering them to stand down or face execution. One officer was told to relax and withdraw or die. Entire towns operated under cartel-imposed curfews enforced by armed patrols. Journalists who tried to report on Zhong activities were kidnapped, tortured, and decapitated. 5 reporters in Veracruz alone were murdered in a single wave directly linked to the cartel. El Mencho himself remained almost invisible. Unlike previous kingpins who courted publicity, he avoided cameras and interviews. Only a handful of verified photographs existed. He enforced strict military discipline inside the organization, arming thousands of sicarios with 50-caliber sniper rifles, armored trucks mounted with machine guns, and rocket launchers. He corrupted officials at every level of government and law enforcement. His wife Rosalinda managed the financial side until her repeated arrests. His son Rubén Oseguera González, called El Menchito, acted as operational second-in-command until Mexican authorities captured him and the United States extradited and convicted him in 2024. Brothers Antonio and Abraham faced their own arrests and extraditions. Other relatives and stepchildren rose and fell in the hierarchy. By 2026, with most immediate family either dead or imprisoned, El Mencho relied on a shrinking circle of blood relatives and moved constantly between remote ranches and mountain cabins. Mexican and American authorities hunted him for more than 15 years. The United States placed a $15 million bounty on his head. Mexico offered 300 million pesos. Satellites, informants, and repeated raids came up empty. He survived by trusting almost no one outside tight family networks and changing locations every few days. That discipline finally cracked because of Guadalupe Moreno Carrillo. Leaked military documents from the 2022 Guacamaya hack had already identified her as part of his inner circle after his wife's second arrest in 2021. On February 20th, 2026, intelligence teams tracked an associate who drove Moreno Carrillo to the Tapalpa property. They confirmed El Mencho's presence the next day. Mexican Defense Secretary General Ricardo Trevilla later stated publicly that the romantic lead was what broke the case. U.S. military intelligence provided critical surveillance and confirmation. The raid launched before sunrise. Helicopters provided overhead cover. When the shooting started, Mencho tried to escape deeper into the woods. Soldiers cleared the cabin area room by room. He took several rounds to the body. Medics stabilized him enough to load him onto a helicopter, but he died in transit. His corpse was delivered to Mexico City under armed escort. The death removed the single figure who had held CJNG together through fear alone. The cartel now confronts the same fractures that ripped Sinaloa apart after El Chapo's capture. Internal factions are already positioning for control of labs, routes, and extortion territories. Rivals smell blood. Mexican forces and U.S. agencies are pressing every advantage. Yet the infrastructure Mencho constructed will not disappear overnight. Fentanyl continues flowing across the border in record volumes. Extortion rackets still crush small businesses and farmers. New leaders will emerge, each promising to match or exceed the savagery that defined the previous reign. Thousands of armed men, billions in cash, and global supply chains remain intact. Mencho rose from a fifth-grade dropout guarding poppy fields to the most feared man in Mexico. He left behind a documented trail of thousands of murders, countless tortured corpses, and entire regions living in terror. The fires he ordered still burned across Jalisco and neighboring states while his body lay in a Mexico City morgue. The last undisputed kingpin was gone, but the machine of violence he perfected kept running at full speed. Mexico tallied its fresh dead and waited to see who would step into the vacuum and how much more blood the cartel war would demand. Fausto Isidro Mesa Flores, known as El Chapo Isidro, joined the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list on February 4, 2025. At 42 years old, he leads the Mesa Flores Transnational Criminal Organization, a violent Sinaloa-based cartel responsible for flooding the United States with fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana. The U.S. State Department offers $5 million for his capture. Unlike flashy kingpins who flaunt wealth and court fame, Mesa Flores survives by staying invisible. No recent photos exist. He avoids interviews, social media, and ostentatious displays. This low profile has kept him free for over 2 decades, while rivals like Joaquin El Chapo Guzman rot in prison or lie dead. Cartel leaders who live loud die fast. Those who operate like ghosts endure. Mesa Flores was born on June 19, 1982, in Guasave, Sinaloa, Mexico. He entered the drug trade young, trafficking since the early 2000s from his hometown base. By 2005, he aligned with the Beltran Leyva organization, a Sinaloa cartel faction. He rose as an enforcer during the bloody split from El Chapo's group after Arturo Beltran Leyva's 2009 death. Mesa Flores led Los Mazatlecos, a hit squad infamous for massacres and turf wars. In 2011, his men slaughtered 12 people in a Durango bar, leaving bodies piled with notes threatening rivals. In 2012, they dumped 14 mutilated corpses in Nuevo Laredo, heads severed and arranged in coolers as warnings to Los Zetas. His cartel controls plazas in Sinaloa, Sonora, and Baja California, extorting farmers, kidnapping businessmen, and torturing informants. U.S. indictments from 2012 charge him with smuggling tons of drugs across the border. A 2019 federal warrant in Washington, D.C., adds firearms possession and conspiracy to distribute over 500 grams of meth, 5 kilograms of cocaine, 1 kilogram of heroin, and 1,000 kilograms of marijuana. The brutality under Mesa Flores mirrors the worst of Mexico's cartel wars. His organization uses gun battles, murders, and extortion to hold territory. In 2013, they clashed with Sinaloa forces in Guasave, leaving 18 dead in a single ambush. Videos show his sicarios executing captives with chainsaws, like dissolving bodies in acid or forcing victims to fight each other to the death. One 2020 incident involved kidnapping a rival's family, raping the women, and mailing severed fingers to demand payment. The Mesa Flores group linked to the December 2024 seizure of over 20 million fentanyl pills in Mexico, the largest ever. They produce counterfeit pills stamped with luxury brands like Louis Vuitton or Rolls-Royce to evade detection. Estimates put their annual revenue in the billions, fueling arms purchases, including 50 caliber rifles and grenade launchers. Mesa Flores corrupts local police and politicians, ensuring safe passage for shipments through ports like Mazatlan. Why does he outlast others? Flashy leaders invite capture. El Chapo built tunnels, escaped prison twice, and gave Rolling Stone interviews. He lived in mansions with diamond-encrusted guns and fleets of luxury cars. Rivals targeted him, authorities tracked his ego. Captured in 2016, extradited in 2017, he's now serving life in a U.S. supermax. Pablo Escobar paraded wealth in Colombia, building zoos and running for office. Dead by 1993, hunted down in a rooftop shootout. Osael Cardenas Guillen of the Gulf Cartel flaunted gold-plated AK-47s and Tiger Pets. Extradited in 2007, his cartel fractured. Mesa Flores does the opposite. He lives modestly, moves quietly through rural Sinaloa and Nuevo León. Last sighted in 2013 at a San Pedro Garza Garcia basketball game with family, blending in. No bling, no public feuds. He delegates violence to lieutenants like Pedro Inzunza Noriega, keeping his hands clean. This strategy lets him rebuild after losses. When the Beltran Leyva crumbled, he pivoted to his own outfit, allying with remnants against Sinaloa's Chapitos faction. Other ghost leaders prove the point. Ismael El Mayo Zambada co-led Sinaloa for decades without arrest until 2024. Born in 1948, he trafficked since the 1970s, amassing billions. He avoided photos, lived in remote Culiacan ranches, and bribed officials silently. No parties, no media. Captured at 76 in Texas after a betrayal, his low-key bought him 50 years free. Rafael Caro Quintero founded the Guadalajara Cartel in the 1980s. Released in 2013 after 28 years in prison, he went underground, directing marijuana ops from the shadows. Rearrested in 2022, but his post-release survival relied on anonymity. Juan Jose Esparragoza Moreno, El Azul, vanished in the 2000s. Rumored dead multiple times, he may still operate quietly. These men shun spotlights, using family networks and corruption over spectacle. Flash draws drones, informants, and raids. Ghosts slip through. Mesa Flores embodies this. In May 2025, his Guasave cartel allied with Sinaloa's La Mayiza against Los Chapitos, sparking clashes in Mocarito and Guamuchil. Videos from June 2025 show his Vitachi Special Forces battling rivals in Culiacan's Tierra Blanca. Dozens died, bodies left in streets with narco messages. Yet, he remains unseen. The FBI calls him heavily armed and dangerous, linked to heinous crimes. His addition to the top 10 list replaces child sex trafficker Donald Eugene Fields II as the 533rd fugitive. Authorities believe he's in Mexico, possibly Sinaloa or Nuevo León. U.S. agencies like DIA and Homeland Security investigations built the case through wiretaps and seizures. Low-profile survival isn't foolproof. El Mencho, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, led Jing for 15 years with minimal visibility. Few photos, constant movement between Michoacan ranches. His cartel-downed helicopters boiled enemies alive and controlled fentanyl labs. But on February 22, 2026, Mexican forces killed him in Tapalpa after tracking a girlfriend. Retaliation killed 25 troops, torched 85 vehicles across states. Even ghosts get caught eventually. Mesa Flores knows this. He adapts, allying with Jang remnants or Sinaloa factions as needed. His organization persists because it fragments power, no single head to cut off. Cartel wars claim thousands yearly. In 2024, Mexico saw 30,000 homicides tied to organized crime. Mesa Flores contributes directly. His men mine roads, drone bomb rivals, and execute journalists. One 2017 video showed them skinning a Zeta alive, screams echoing as they peeled flesh. Survival demands such terror. Flashy bosses like El Chapo inspire movies but end buried or caged. Ghosts like Mesa Flores build empires in silence, outliving the noise. As long as demand flows from the US, they'll adapt. His capture could fracture his group, sparking more blood. Until then, he remains a shadow, profiting from poison while others fall. The FBI hunts, but low profiles win wars of attrition. Mexican cartel bosses no longer ride around in cowboy hats, firing AK-47s from pickup trucks like the old days. They run their empires like CEOs of multinational tech firms, pouring millions into research and development, recruiting engineers from universities, sourcing components from China and the United States, and building supply chains that deliver death and drugs with corporate efficiency. They treat weaponized drones, armored monstruos, narco submarines, and encrypted communication networks as core business tools. These technologies let them surveil territory, strike rivals with precision, smuggle tons of fentanyl across oceans and borders, coordinate mass killings without detection, and keep profits flowing into the billions while the DIA and Mexican forces chase shadows. The result is a level of brutality that turns entire regions into killing fields where civilians are bombed from the sky, shredded by machine gun fire from rolling fortresses, or drowned in the wreckage of failed submarine runs. Take the weaponized drones first. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CHN, operates a dedicated drone operators unit with its own military-style patches and specialized sicarios trained like drone pilots in Ukraine. They buy commercial DJI models off the shelf, some as cheap as $420 for a Mini 3, others $25,000 agricultural T-40s that can haul heavy payloads. They modify them with galvanized tubes packed with gunpowder, metal fragments, or chemical explosives they call potato bombs. In October 2025, a CJNG drone slammed one of these into a heavily guarded compound of the state prosecutor's office in Tijuana. The blast ripped through the walls, even though no one died that time. It proved the cartel could hit targets once considered untouchable. In Michoacán and Guerrero, CJG drones carpet bomb rival territory and civilian areas to drive out populations that support enemies like Carteles Unidos. Between 2021 and 2025, Cheng alone carried out at least 42 confirmed weaponized drone attacks that killed 21 people and wounded dozens more. Many victims were rural farmers or low-level rivals found with shrapnel embedded so deep in their chests and faces that identification required dental records. In 2024, Mexico recorded 77 drone bombings nationwide, up from 35 the year before. Cartels now drop explosives that detonate on contact using first-person view FPV technology, copied straight from Ukrainian battlefield footage. One video from Sinaloa showed an FPV drone racing at 100 miles per hour into a rival convoy, exploding in a fireball that flipped armored trucks and left bodies scattered across the road with limbs missing. Cheng has even experimented with fiber optic control systems and multi-munition drops so one operator can hit multiple targets in seconds. These same drones smuggle fentanyl across the US border, carrying up to 100 kilograms per flight on pre-programmed GPS routes. US Northern Command reported roughly 1,000 cartel drones crossing into American airspace every month in 2024 for reconnaissance and deliveries. The International Narcotics Control Board confirmed in 2025 that cartels increasingly use homemade drones for fentanyl runs because satellite guidance reduces the risk of human couriers getting caught. Leaders sit in safe houses watching live feeds on laptops, ordering strikes the way a CEO approves a quarterly production run. The monstruos, or narco tanks, are the ground counterpart to this aerial terror. Cartels weld thick steel plates, sometimes layered inside the bodywork to look like normal trucks, onto heavy-duty pickups, dump trucks, and even semi-trailers. They cut gun ports, mount .50 caliber machine guns on turrets, and add run-flat tires. Some now sport cope cages, metal frameworks over the cab, designed to detonate drone bombs before they reach the crew, copied directly from Russian tanks in Ukraine. In November 2023, CJNG monstruos equipped with these cages rolled into an ambush against Mexican soldiers in Jalisco, pouring heavy fire while shrugging off initial drone attempts. The Gulf Cartel's Scorpion Cell parades their monstruos in videos, showing convoys of armored beasts with machine gun turrets patrolling streets while sicarios lean out firing. In Sinaloa, rival factions use them in open battles that leave streets littered with bullet-riddled corpses and burning vehicles. Mexican authorities destroyed 14 monstruos in Tamaulipas in June 2023 and another 23 in a single operation there later that year. Each one seized had been used to ram roadblocks, spray residential neighborhoods with gunfire, and transport hit teams that execute dozens in a single night. In one 2024 clash in Culiacan, Sinaloa monstruos rolled through Tierra Blanca while drones provided overhead cover, resulting in bodies left in the street with cartel messages carved into the flesh. These vehicles cost tens of thousands to build, but let small crews dominate territory that used to require hundreds of foot soldiers. Cartel leaders treat the Monstro program like an automotive division, constantly iterating designs based on battlefield reports from sicarios. Narco submarines complete the maritime logistics arm of this corporate machine. These low-profile semi-submersibles and fully submersible vessels are built in hidden shipyards along the Pacific coast of Colombia and Ecuador, then loaded with cocaine and fentanyl precursors for voyages that cross entire oceans. In February 2026, the Mexican Navy seized a semi-submersible near Manzanillo, Colima, carrying nearly 4 tons of cocaine and arresting 3 crew members tied to the shipment. That was just one of dozens. In 2024, authorities worldwide intercepted a near-record 25 narco subs, many crossing the Atlantic to Europe or the Pacific toward Australia and New Zealand. One vessel seized near the Azores in early 2026 held almost 9 tons of cocaine, worth over 500 million pounds sterling. Another in the Pacific carried more than 5 tons destined for Australia. Crews, often poorly paid Colombian or Brazilian fishermen, endure voyages of weeks in cramped diesel fume-filled hulls that ride just below the surface to evade radar. Many never make it. Vessels sink or are abandoned when engines fail, leaving bodies floating in the Pacific. In July 2025, Colombian forces seized the first known unmanned drone-style narco sub, equipped with a Starlink antenna off the Caribbean coast, capable of carrying 1.5 tons autonomously. Leaders treat these subs like a shipping fleet division, tracking them via satellite phones and encrypted apps, calculating risk versus profit, the same way legitimate CEOs manage container ships. Between 2023 and early 2025, Mexican naval operations alone seized over 111 tons of cocaine from these vessels. The technology has evolved from crude fiberglass hulls in the 2000s to sophisticated designs that cross the Atlantic in one go, delivering product straight to European ports where it is cut and distributed through the same encrypted networks. None of this works without encrypted communication systems that let bosses issue orders like a boardroom conference call. Cartels long ago moved beyond simple radios. They install rogue antennas on legitimate cell towers to create private encrypted networks spanning entire states. They use end-to-end encrypted apps like WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, and custom platforms that auto-delete messages. After police busted earlier systems like EncroChat and Sky ECC in Europe, cartels adapted instantly, hiring former telecom engineers to build new infrastructure. Qing once operated a front telecommunications company, employing over 50 specialists across 4 states. Sinaloa factions use PGP encrypted phones and apps that route through multiple VPNs and foreign servers. These systems coordinate everything from drone strikes to submarine departures to the placement of landmines on rural roads. In leaked audio from past operations, bosses are heard calmly ordering hits on police commanders or directing the movement of tons of product while sitting hundreds of miles away. Social media platforms serve the public-facing side, with cartel accounts recruiting sicarios, advertising fentanyl pills stamped with brand logos, and posting execution videos to terrorize rivals. The DIA's 2024 National Drug Threat Assessment noted that social media and encrypted apps now extend cartel reach directly into every U.S. community, making street-level dealers obsolete in many areas. When one network gets compromised, leaders simply switch to another, treating encryption like software updates in a tech company. This allows them to run decentralized cells where lieutenants operate with near autonomy but still answer to central command through unbreakable channels. The brutality enabled by this tech is industrial in scale. Drone strikes in Michoacan have displaced tens of thousands of civilians, leaving villages empty except for rotting corpses and unexploded ordnance. Monstruos roll through towns at night, machine guns blazing, executing anyone suspected of talking to authorities and leaving bodies hanging from bridges, with signs reading "This is what happens to snitches." Narco sub losses drown crews in the open ocean, but the ones that succeed flood the U.S. with enough fentanyl to kill hundreds of thousands. Encrypted orders trigger ambushes that wipe out entire police convoys, as happened when sieging downed a Mexican Army helicopter with a rocket in 2015 and has repeated with drones since. Cartel leaders invest in anti-drone systems, Starlink for remote control, and even experiments with AI-assisted targeting because they view technology as the edge that keeps profits rising, while body counts climb into the tens of thousands every year. They source DJI parts through shell companies, hire Ukrainian-trained operators through dark web recruiters, and test new submarine designs in hidden coves the way Silicon Valley prototypes gadgets. When Mexican forces or the DIA seize one tool, the cartels iterate faster than governments can respond, protected by layers of encryption and plausible deniability. This is not random violence anymore. It is engineered, scalable, and profitable on a global level. Cartel CEOs sit in air-conditioned safe houses, monitoring drone feeds, submarine GPS pings, and encrypted profit reports on multiple screens. They calculate the cost of a lost monstro against the territory gained, the expense of a drone unit against the rivals eliminated, and the risk of a submarine voyage against the street value of 4 tons of pure cocaine. The old image of the sombrero-wearing narco is dead. In its place stands a new generation of leaders who weaponize technology with the cold precision of corporate executives, turning Mexico's countryside into testing grounds for the next evolution of narco warfare. Every new drone model, every upgraded monstro, every Starlink-equipped sub means more bodies shredded, more families destroyed, and more fentanyl pouring across borders. The machine keeps improving, and the death toll keeps rising, because these men run their empires like the most ruthless tech companies on Earth, where the product is addiction and the byproduct is massacre. Mexico and the United States are still figuring out how to fight an enemy that treats innovation as its sharpest weapon and human life as nothing more than collateral in the quarterly earnings report. Juan Reyes Meja Gonzalez, the man known as R1, Kiki, carries one of the highest price tags ever placed on a Mexican cartel leader by the United States. Born on November 18, 1975, In Ciudad Mier, Tamaulipas, this 50-year-old Gulf Cartel veteran heads the Los Rojos faction and has spent more than 2 decades moving tons of cocaine from Central and South America straight into the busiest border plazas in Nuevo Laredo and Reynosa. United States authorities say he alone pushed more than 2,000 kilograms of cocaine through Dallas in 2006. He faces federal indictments from 2006 in the Northern District of Texas for narcotics trafficking and money laundering, and from 2008 in Washington, D.C. for conspiracy to traffic cocaine and launder the proceeds. The U.S. State Department now offers up to $15 million for information leading directly to his arrest and conviction. That figure puts him in the same deadly league as the most wanted kingpins on the continent, yet R1 has stayed free while flashier bosses fell. The $15 million bounty is not just a number. It is a window into the cold business of buying betrayal inside organizations that answer disloyalty with torture, dismemberment, and public display of corpses. R1 did not rise through headlines or gold-plated guns. He rose through control of the pipelines. As plaza boss for the Gulf Cartel's Reynosa operations and later leader of Los Rojos, he coordinated shipments that crossed the Rio Grande in tractor trailers, hidden compartments in cars, and tunnels under the border. Every kilo that reached Houston, Chicago, or Atlanta funneled millions back to the cartel's war chest. He collected those proceeds in suitcases and wire transfers, then washed them through front businesses along the Texas-Mexico line. The 2006 Dallas indictment alone tied him to distribution networks that flooded North Texas with product while he sat safely south of the river. By 2008, he was formally charged in D.C. as a major conspirator in the Gulf Cartel's international supply chain. None of that paperwork put handcuffs on him. He simply kept moving between safe houses in Mier, Reynosa, and the remote ranchlands of Tamaulipas, protected by layers of sicarios who answered only to him. The real blood price of R1's power came during the Gulf Cartel's civil war that exploded in 2010, when the organization split between Los Rojos, loyal to the old Cardenas family, and Los Metros, loyal to Jorge Eduardo Costillas Níchez. R1 found himself sidelined. The Metros took the prized Reynosa Plaza and sent him to the smaller Frontera Chica corridor around Ciudad Mier. He did not accept the demotion. On September 2, 2011, R1 and Rafael Cardenas Vela ordered the assassination of Samuel Flores Borrego, the Metro leader who had taken what R1 considered his territory. Gunmen ambushed Flores Borrego in broad daylight. His death lit the fuse. For the next 18 months, Tamaulipas became a slaughterhouse. Rojos and Metros fought block by block in Reynosa, Nuevo Laredo, and Matamoros. Bodies appeared hanging from overpasses with narco messages carved into the skin. Heads were delivered in ice chests to rival plazas. Entire families of suspected informants were lined up and executed in their homes, children included. In one wave of retaliation, Rojos gunmen stormed a Metro safe house and left 15 corpses stacked in the street. Metros answered by dumping mutilated Rojos bodies along Highway 2 with signs reading "This is what happens to traitors." The war killed thousands, displaced tens of thousands, and turned once quiet border towns into ghost cities where residents locked doors at dusk and listened for the sound of convoys. R1's faction did not win the war. The Metros eventually pushed them back, but the violence cemented his reputation as a man willing to burn everything to protect his slice of the trade. That same willingness to spill blood kept him alive after the split with Los Zetas. When the Zetas broke away in 2010 and declared war on their former Gulf masters, R1 walked a tightrope. He was accused by some of being too soft on the Zetas. Others claimed he tried to broker peace. In late 2014, narco banners appeared claiming R1 had helped negotiate a temporary truce between remaining Gulf factions and Zeta remnants. The banners praised unity against common enemies, but the peace never held. Shootouts continued. Extortion rackets squeezed businesses and farmers. Kidnappings for ransom became routine. R1's men specialized in the same signature brutality that defined the Gulf Cartel since the Zetas era. Victims boiled in barrels of diesel, flayed alive, or forced to dig their own graves before mass execution. Mass graves in Tamaulipas regularly yielded dozens of bodies with hands bound and bullet wounds to the back of the head. R1 never appeared in the videos or banners himself. He stayed in the shadows, issuing orders through encrypted phones and trusted lieutenants while the body count climbed. The $15 million bounty sits at the center of a system designed to turn greed against loyalty. The U.S. Narcotics Rewards Program, run by the State Department, has paid out more than $135 million since 1986 for information that led to the arrest or conviction of 75 major traffickers. Tips go to U.S. embassies, DEA offices, or directly to federal agents. An interagency committee reviews every claim. Payment requires proof that the information directly caused the arrest and that the target was convicted or otherwise brought to justice. The government promises confidentiality and, when needed, relocation for the informant and family. In theory, it is a simple transaction: betray the cartel, collect millions, disappear. In practice, it almost never works for men like R1. The first reason is simple terror. Cartels maintain internal security squads whose only job is hunting snitches. Suspected informants are not shot once and left in a ditch. They are tortured for days. Videos recovered by Mexican authorities show Gulf sicarios using power tools to remove skin, pouring acid on open wounds, or cutting out organs while the victim is still alive. Families receive photos of the mutilated body with a warning that the same fate waits for anyone who talks. In Tamaulipas, entire neighborhoods have been wiped out after one resident was suspected of feeding information to authorities. The $15 million prize means nothing when the cost is watching your wife and children die the same way. Most potential informants calculate that risk and stay silent. The second reason is cartel counterintelligence. R1 and leaders like him pay their own bounties for the heads of anyone who even considers cooperating. They infiltrate local police and military units with monthly payoffs that dwarf any government salary. A soldier or cop who spots movement around a safe house is more likely to call the cartel first than to call the DEA. When raids do happen, targets are often tipped off hours in advance. R1 has survived multiple operations because his network inside Tamaulipas State Security is deep and well paid. The same corruption that lets him move tons of cocaine also blinds the eyes that should be watching him. Third, the bureaucratic reality of the program works against quick results. Payment only comes after conviction, which can take years of extradition fights and trials. Some informants have waited a decade or more. Others claim the U.S. has quietly reduced or denied payments after the fact, citing insufficient direct contribution. Public stories from Colombian informants who helped locate major targets describe years of legal battles before any money arrived, if it arrived at all. The promise of $15 million loses its power when the reward might never materialize or might come after your identity has already been burned inside the cartel. Fourth, the best intelligence on top leaders rarely comes from paid civilian tips. It comes from signals intelligence, satellite tracking, rival cartel betrayals, or captured lieutenants who flip under pressure in U.S. custody. R1 keeps an extremely low profile, no verified recent photos, no social media, no flashy properties. He moves between ranches and safe houses using only blood relatives and a handful of lifelong sicarios. He delegates day-to-day violence and logistics so that even if one cell falls, the trail does not reach him. That operational discipline is why he outlasted flashier bosses who got caught because they needed the spotlight. Compare R1 to those who fell. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman had a $5 million bounty and still escaped prison twice before the final tip, combined with years of dia pressure, brought him down. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, carried a $15 million bounty until Mexican forces killed him in Tapalpa just days ago. Both men became visible through ego or relentless pursuit. R1 never made that mistake. He remains a ghost in the same border badlands where he started, quietly directing shipments that still flood the United States while the bodies of his enemies and suspected traitors continue to surface in irrigation canals and abandoned warehouses. The business of the bounty is therefore a high-stakes gamble that favors the House. The United States dangles millions because the program has scored real victories and because the optics of offering justice for cash look strong in Washington. Cartels counter with a simpler, faster system. Death for anyone who even thinks about claiming the prize. Inside the Gulf Cartel's remaining factions, the message is drilled into every recruit. Talk and your head ends up on a bridge with a cardboard sign. That equation has kept R1 free for 15 years despite indictments, sanctions, and a price tag that would change most people's lives forever. The $15 million sits unclaimed because the men who could collect it know the cartel's price is higher, paid in screams and blood rather than wire transfers. As long as the plazas in Reynosa and Nuevo Laredo keep moving product north and the money flows south, R1 will keep operating in the shadows. New generations of sicarios will take the bullets and the blame while he coordinates from a distance. The bounty will stay posted on State Department websites, updated occasionally when another high-profile death reminds Washington that the war continues. But until someone decides that $15 million is worth more than their life and the lives of everyone they love, Juan Reyes Meja Gonzalez will remain exactly what the cartel needs him to be, the $15 million man that nobody can touch. Mexico will keep counting its dead in Tamaulipas. The drugs will keep crossing, and the business of the bounty will keep failing the one test that matters, turning a price on a man's head into a body in custody. In the rugged mountains of Sinaloa and the avocado fields of Michoacán, towns still throw parades and erect shrines for men who ordered thousands of murders. When Mexican Marines captured Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Loera, El Chapo, on February 22, 2014, more than 2,000 people marched through Culiacán with brass bands and banners reading "Free El Chapo" and "We do not want his extradition." They gathered at the shrine of Jess Malverde, the folk saint of narcos, a bandit mythologized as a Robin Hood who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. Crowds chanted "Long live Chapo." Residents told reporters he gave jobs, money, and security in places where the government delivered nothing but poverty and corruption. 4 days later, another march drew hundreds more at the same shrine. Similar scenes played out in Guamchil and Mocorito. Even in 2024, after El Chapo had spent years in a U.S. supermax, his daughter Alejandrina Guzman distributed food boxes stamped with his face and the brand El Chapo 701 to poor families in Guadalajara during the coronavirus crisis. Videos showed lines of people accepting the packages while cartel gunmen stood guard. This is the Robin Hood complex that keeps certain cartel leaders loved in their strongholds. The Sinaloa Cartel, under El Chapo and later factions, built loyalty by filling the vacuum left by a negligent state. Locals in Badiraguato, El Chapo's hometown, still repeat stories of medicine delivered to the sick, truckloads of drinking water sent to storm-damaged villages, roads paved with cartel cash, churches repaired, and soccer fields built. A high school student named Lucero Uriarte said in 2015 he helped the poor more than anyone because he knew what they suffered. A psychology student in Culiacán told NPR in 2014 that under Chapo, everything stayed under control. No stealing, no kidnapping, no extortion in their towns. Pedro Alvarez at the Malverde Shrine said Chapo kept the peace and made small towns safer and richer. The cartel handed out cash and gifts at holidays, funded local fiestas, and paid for medical care. When Hurricane Ingrid hit Tamaulipas in 2013, the Gulf Cartel, a rival, did the same, but Sinaloa perfected it. During the 2020 pandemic, Sinaloa factions and even gang cells distributed pantry boxes, sanitizer, and cash across multiple states. The message was clear: we provide when the government will not. In Michoacan, the pattern repeats with different faces. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel until Mexican forces killed him on February 22, 2026, received public thanks as recently as December 2024. A sign at a Christmas fair in Coacalm read: "The children of Coacalm thank Mr. Nemesio Oseguera and his sons for their noble gesture. Thank you for your gifts." Videos of the banner spread online and triggered a federal investigation into local officials. Chung gunmen have handed out aid after tropical storms and during the pandemic, mirroring Sinaloa tactics. In El Ahuatel, Jalisco, El Mencho reportedly financed a hospital that served his security detail and local residents. The cartel controls avocado orchards and extorts growers, but also repairs roads and provides protection against rival factions in areas where state police fear to enter. Earlier groups like La Familia Michoacana and the Knights Templar took the Robin Hood role further. They built parks, community centers, schools, and drug rehabilitation clinics while preaching a pseudo-religious code against drugs for locals. They administered justice in remote towns, settling disputes and punishing petty thieves when courts were hours away or corrupt. Farmers received loans for crops. Towns got electricity and water lines. All of it came from cartel profits. The protection angle runs deepest. In Sinaloa, under El Chapo and his successors, residents say the cartel kept other criminals out. No random kidnappings. No street-level extortion in controlled plazas. Farmers could grow opium poppies or marijuana without rival gangs stealing the harvest. In Michoacan, Ching and predecessors imposed order on avocado plantations and logging, punishing those who refused to pay the quota, but also shielding compliant communities from worse predators. Cartels solve problems the government ignores: dispute resolution, security against cattle rustlers, even minor infrastructure like fixing bridges after flood. They employ thousands in the only growth industry available: planting, harvesting, packaging, and moving product north. A single poppy field can feed a family for a year when legal crops cannot. That economic reality turns killers into benefactors. The brutality that funds this benevolence never stops. El Chapo's Sinaloa Cartel dumped bodies in vats of acid, hung corpses from bridges with warning signs, and waged wars that killed tens of thousands. His men beheaded rivals, raped families of snitches, and forced entire villages to flee when they refused to grow drugs. El Mencho's Jing escalated further. They shot down a military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade in 2015, killing 9 soldiers. They dropped bombs from drones on civilians and enemies alike. They boiled victims alive in diesel barrels, performed el guiso, carved messages into living flesh, and ate organs on camera. In Michoacan, they burned towns, displaced tens of thousands, and turned avocado fields into battlegrounds where farmers pay or die. Even while handing out Christmas gifts in Coacalm, Jung sicarios were executing rivals and extorting the same families they claimed to help. The aid is selective. Refuse the quota or talk to authorities, and your head ends up on a pike. The protection is a racket. Pay us, or we become the threat. Government absence makes the complex possible. In rural Sinaloa and Michoacan, paved roads end where cartel territory begins. Schools crumble. Hospitals lack medicine. Police earn less than cartel lookouts and often work for both sides. Decades of corruption mean federal forces raid one week and disappear the next. Cartels step into that void with cash that buys silence and gratitude. They fund political campaigns, bribe mayors, and deliver votes. In return, they operate with near impunity. The Robin Hood image is deliberate public relations. El Chapo gave interviews claiming he helped the poor. Shung videos show gunmen distributing aid while armed. Narco corridos glorify the generosity. Shrines to Malverde, and now to dead capos, keep the myth alive. Families in Badiraguato still speak of El Chapo as the man who understood hunger because he grew up poor. In Agalia, El Mencho's birthplace, some residents quietly credit him with keeping other cartels out even as his own men terrorize the region. The love is not universal. Thousands have fled Sinaloa mountains because cartel pressure to plant poppies destroyed legal farming. Mass graves in Michoacan hold hundreds of bodies from jung turf wars. Journalists who expose the dual face disappear. Yet for those left behind, the choice is stark: starve under an indifferent state or accept the cartel's bargain, food, jobs, roads, and security in exchange for loyalty and silence. The fentanyl that funds the aid kills more than 100,000 Americans yearly and devastates Mexican families with addiction. The violence that enforces the rackets leaves towns with homicide rates 5 times the national average. Still, the parades continue because the alternative feels worse. When El Mencho died on February 22, 2026, blockades and fires erupted across Jalisco and Michoacan, not just in rage, but in fear of the vacuum. New leaders will rise, promising the same mix of terror and handouts. This is not romance, it is survival in failed territory. Cartel leaders exploit poverty they help create by flooding the world with poison while tossing crumbs to the communities they control. The government's absence lets them pose as saviors. Shrines and parades prove the strategy works. Until the state delivers real roads, real jobs, real justice, men like El Chapo and El Mencho will keep being remembered as Robin Hoods by the people they bled dry. The blood never stops flowing, but neither does the aid that buys the silence. Mexico counts its dead, and the cycle repeats.